Welcome to this explainer. Have you ever actually stopped to think that there's this invisible web of rules dictating pretty much every single thing you do? It's completely true. The history of law is, in many ways, literally the history of mankind, mostly because any functioning society just has to have rules to govern how we relate to each other. So today, we're going to map out this hidden legal cosmos that silently structures your everyday life.
Okay, let's dive into this with our roadmap for today. First up, mapping the legal cosmos. Second, people, property, and rights. Third, delicts, when things go wrong. And fourth, defenses and unjust enrichment.
Section 1. Mapping the legal cosmos, the broad strokes of law.
To really get how foundational these rules are, let's look at them out in the wild. Consider an ordinary day in the life of someone we'll just call John Citizen. He buys a box of breakfast cereal. Right there, that involves the law of ownership, and the artwork on the cereal's packaging involves someone else's intellectual property. Then he pays a fare to ride the train. Bam, that's a contract of transportation. He gets to the office, and now his day is governed by employment and labor law. Literally, without even realizing it, John has navigated a massive, wildly complex web of legal relationships all before 9 a.m.
To make sense of the whole shebang, the law draws some major boundaries. The biggest one is the split between public law and private law. Public law controls that top-down, vertical relationship between the state and its citizens, so think constitutional law or criminal law. Private law, on the flip side, governs the horizontal relationships between everyday citizens just dealing with each other. And for this explainer, we're going to focus heavily on private law.
Section 2. People, property, and rights. The players and the game.
Moving deeper into private law, we really need to meet the players on the board. This brings us to the law of persons and property, which basically figures out exactly who can hold rights and what they can hold those rights over. The absolute foundational concept here is the legal subject. A legal subject is any human being or entity that is actually subject to the law. Essentially, it means you have legal capacity, the capacity to be the bearer of rights and duties in the eyes of the law. Bottom line, if you aren't a legal subject, you can't own property and you sure can't sign a contract.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is that in law, the word person doesn't just mean a human being. We definitely have natural persons, which is every single human from a newborn baby to an adult. But we also have juristic persons. These are artificial entities like a company named BB Investments Pty Limited. If Bill and Bob create this company, the law actually treats the company as a completely separate third person. It can own cars, it can sign contracts, and it has perpetual succession, meaning even if Bill and Bob pass away, the company just keeps right on existing.
So these legal subjects can hold rights. But what kind of rights are we talking about? There are four main categories. You've got real rights, which are rights to physical property, like a kitchen table or a farm. Then there's intellectual property rights relating to creations of the mind, like an awesome invention or a best-selling novel. Personality rights protect your physical integrity and your reputation. And finally, personal rights, which actually allow you to demand a performance from someone else, like demanding they pay you for that horse you just sold them. Let's zoom in on real rights for a second. The absolute cornerstone here is the right of ownership. It gives you the most complete power you can possibly have over property. You can use it, enjoy it, or even legally destroy it. But here is the catch, and it's a big one. It is never absolute. An owner cannot just do whatever they like. Your ownership is always restricted by public dictates, think zoning laws and traffic regulations, and of course, by the rights of your neighbors.
And this brilliantly illustrates a super common confusion, the difference between ownership and possession. In everyday conversation, we mix these up all the time, but in law, they are totally different animals. Say Abdul owns a car, but he lends it to Bambi for a fun road trip to Durban. Abdul still has ownership, but Bambi currently has possession. Possession just requires physical control of the property, plus the intention to exercise that control in your own interest.
So how does someone actually acquire that ultimate right of ownership? You can acquire it originally or derivatively. Original methods happen when you don't get the right from someone else, like occupation, where you catch a wild bird, or prescription, where you openly possess a piece of land for 30 years uninterrupted and it legally becomes yours. Derivative methods, on the other hand, are when ownership transfers from one person to another. That's like the physical delivery of a sold car or the official registration of a farm at the deeds office.
Section 3. Delicts, when things go wrong.
Human interaction isn't all just about buying property and happily transferring rights. Sometimes we cause each other harm.
Think about it. What legally happens if someone negligently drives their car straight into your fence or publishes a totally defamatory statement about you online? How does the legal cosmos actually balance the scales when one legal subject suffers a tangible loss because of another?
The answer is a delict. A delict is the specific legal mechanism that compels a wrongdoer to make good on the damage or loss they've caused you. Look, if a natural disaster strikes, that's just terrible luck or an insurance claim. But if a person unlawfully and culpably causes you harm, the law of delict steps right in to grant you a legal right to claim compensation.
So, the crucial point is that you cannot just sue someone simply because you suffer damage. No way. You actually have to prove a strict 5-part checklist. For delictual liability to stick, there must be an act, unlawfulness, fault, causation, and actual damage or harm. Let's break down a couple of the trickier ones so you can see how this works in practice.
First up, the act. An act has to be voluntary human conduct. Now, that doesn't mean it has to be deliberate, but it must be capable of being controlled by the will. For instance, a daydreaming gatekeeper who just forgets to close a gate before a train comes is absolutely committing an act in the eyes of the law. But someone who is literally sleepwalking or suddenly faints behind the wheel of a car, they aren't acting voluntarily, and therefore they actually cannot commit a delict.
Then there is fault. An act can definitely be unlawful, but the wrongdoer must also be at fault for you to win a claim. This takes two forms: intention or negligence. Intention is when your will is specifically directed at bringing about a result, and you know full well it's unlawful. Negligence is a bit different. It's measured against the standard of the reasonable person. Basically, if an ordinary reasonable person would have foreseen the harm and taken steps to prevent it, and you didn't, you're negligent.
Section 4. Defenses and unjust enrichment.
We've seen how strict the rules for liability are. But hey, context matters, right? Sometimes an act that totally looks unlawful is actually legally justified. The law provides what we call grounds of justification, special circumstances that miraculously convert an unlawful act into a lawful one. Take necessity, for example. If Gert breaks Koos's window to save someone from a burning house, he hasn't committed a delict. His act is entirely justified by the emergency. Other grounds include self-defense against an unlawful attack, consent, like a boxer accepting the risk of getting punched, statutory authority, and provocation.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about deliberate or negligent harm. But what if there is no delict, and there's no valid contract, but someone still ends up out of pocket? What if you accidentally transfer a bunch of money to the wrong bank account, or buy something you legally shouldn't have?
This introduces a really fascinating principle called unjustified enrichment. The law basically says it is patently unfair for someone to be enriched at the expense of another without a valid legal ground. For example, if Henry, who is a minor, buys a bicycle from Walter without his parents' consent, the contract is invalid. If Henry then refuses to pay for it, he is enriched at Walter's expense. The law steps in and gives Walter the right to claim back that bicycle or its exact value.
When money is paid in error, the law uses an ancient Roman action called the condictio in debiti to fix it. To successfully claim your money back, you have to prove 4 really strict requirements. The payment was made under a mistake, that mistake was actually reasonable, it wasn't a conditional payment, and it wasn't part of a legal compromise. If you meet all of these, the enriched person is legally obligated to give it back.
So, to wrap up our map, what tools or remedies does the legal subject actually have at their disposal? Well, if your rights are currently being threatened, you can get an interdict to stop the person in their tracks. If they've already caused economic, patrimonial damage to your estate, like, say, smashing your car, you'd use the actio legis aquilia to claim your monetary loss. And if they've injured your personality or reputation, like defaming you, you use the actio injuriarum to claim sentimental damages.
We've traced the broad strokes of public and private law, we've defined exactly who plays the game, how we hold and transfer rights, and how the law corrects imbalances through delict and enrichment. Literally every transaction, every drive, every interaction is governed by these invisible rules. So, now that you've seen the map, I want to leave you with this. How is the hidden legal cosmos shaping your actions today, and what might you do differently tomorrow, now that you can finally see the strings? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer.